Hello, everyone. This is episode 12 of Procurement Horizons, and today I have with me Joel Colin Demers. Joel is one of the voices on LinkedIn who's been talking about procurement for the last few years, and he's developed a great following. He helps procurement professionals with their digital literacy. He's also passionate about consulting clients on different pieces of digital procurement. I would love to hear more about that, Joel, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Richa. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I think you said it best, right? Like I love the fact that you used voice and not influencer in the sense that I hate that term, right? For me, it's just sharing what I see, how I help people get better outcomes with procurement technology because I think, procurement professionals have this background in operations and strategic procurement and category management, but not often in technology, right? And we're
Mm.
getting to a point where technology and business in every function, not just procurement, is converging, right? And so I find it super important for procurement professionals to develop digital literacy skills like business analysis, change management, project management. And you'll notice that when I talk about stuff, the skills that you need, I don't mention any specific technologies, right? So we can get into that as we chat, but yeah, I do consulting on one side, actually putting this stuff into practice with clients, and then on the other side, I also try to publish articles, whether it's on LinkedIn through my newsletter, and try to do content like this with you, so that procurement professionals can get access to information that I think they desperately need to level up on digital literacy and ultimately help their business get the outcomes that they're looking for.
Awesome. I totally relate to voice message. That's far better and relates to the work you're trying to do. And you've been my digital procurement mentor. That's the first newsletter I subscribed to when I started reading about procurement after 15 years in the field. Pure procurement, that's the newsletter should be on everyone's agenda because the investment you make in reading that one newsletter per week helps you so much over time. So totally vouch for that. And then you
I
worked
appreciate it.
across with 9 industries, Joel. I've been in the field for 15 years. I've worked with about four. So 9 industries. Wow, pretty cool.
Yeah, well, it's a fact. I think it's a function of being in Quebec, right? So I'm based out of Montreal in Canada, and Quebec is the province where in Canada, French is the main language, and there's multiple industries within the province, right? So, whenever I did consulting mandates in French, it was more important for me to speak French than to have industry experience, right? And so it gave me access to more industry opportunities because of that, right? Where they would rather have somebody who had process and domain than having specific industry experience. And I think in procurement that works really well, right? In the sense where I see the procurement process as being the same fairly, across industries, fairly the same. And then
Yeah.
yes, there are specificities for different commodities or different types of services within industries. And that's what keeps it super interesting to me. But at the core, right, we have spend analysis, category management, sourcing, contract management, procure to pay, accounts payable, and supplier relationship management in a business, right? Or at least we should have it in every business. And so the skills are very transferable from one industry to the other, right? And it just makes me think for people that are watching, like if you're thinking about taking a sideways step in your career and going to another industry, like you should be thinking that way as well.
That's the kind of connections you're able to make, what you're able to bring as insights after a few exposure to a few industries. That's remarkable, and because it's all transferable, as you rightly said. And I would not have been able to guess that French facilitated that. Because I lived in France for a bit, and I heard people, saying that's a constraint. But you're right. Like, the people who speak French, they want somebody who an insider, right? Who understands what they're going through. So yeah, that's a
And I think it's
positive.
just the language barrier, right? It gives you the speed if everybody's on the same wavelength versus bringing industry, but then not being able to understand each other as well as a native speaker, right? So I've been on projects where all you have is the English person, the English expertise, right, that comes into the play,
Mhm.
and that's fine. It works as well, right? I just think people have that preference where,
Mhm.
and I've seen the difference in velocity on projects where you have everybody aligned to a common language, a common culture, right? So I think it's just it's not necessarily something that people actively look for, but I think it's just a
Mm,
bias that people have where if you have choices between two options, you're going to choose the one that's you're more comfortable with from
yeah.
a language standpoint.
Yes, I see that for French and Spanish. People have that bias. Okay, awesome. So, Joel, let's make this interesting. I have had a few questions that I have been wanting to ask you because I keep hearing about that from some of the people who read my newsletter, reach out to me on LinkedIn. And I feel you're the best person to be answering some of these questions for us. I'm going to take this as a learning session for me, to be honest. If I have to compare digital fluency as a skill for myself, I still consider myself somewhere between beginner and intermediate. So this is a learning opportunity. Okay, same here. Okay, so digital procurement, it gets called future all the time right now. And what do you think is actually working versus what is just a hype in your
Yeah,
experience?
that's a great question. I think we often lead with technology instead of leading with the business outcomes that we want, right? Which is odd, right? Because to your point, a lot of procurement professionals are working on that digital fluency, that digital literacy, and so that's the trap, right? Is focusing on the technology. I think you need to put yourself in a mode where you're constantly learning about the art of the possible with technology,
Mm,
but you shouldn't be looking at technology first. You should be always thinking about, okay, what is our spend profile, right? Where are we spending all our dollars in our business? And what is the strategies that we want to use from a category management standpoint or even a business, right? Do I want to be a low cost provider, high operational excellence? Do I want to be high margin, right? Going back to Michael Porter and his I think there's 3 or 4 different strategies, right? And how do we differentiate within our market, and how does procurement fill in to that or fit into that? And once you've got the objectives that you're looking for, informed by what the art of the possible is, right? So if you keep abreast on, what the different types of artificial intelligence functionality is, right, around machine learning, natural language processing, generative AI, anomaly detection. There's like 12 or 13 different subfields, if not more,
mm,
right? I think that's when I talk about the art of the possible, it's knowing like, oh, I know that, I can take an invoice and we can use a technology to scan and extract all of the information off of that automatically to get it into an electronic format. That's
mm.
knowing what the art of the possible is. And then you'll apply that to, okay, if we have a category where we have a bunch of invoices, right, then the value is probably in automating that work, right? And so that's always how you should be thinking about it, is business first, the outcomes that we want, and then technology comes in service to that. Whereas I think a lot of the talk about the future of procurement is artificial intelligence, for example, is very shallow and is a tech first approach, where you then try to fit it into your business, and then, does not equals often appears, right?
Mm.
In terms of the equation. So I think for me, the future's already here. It's always been here, right? Like technology is at the service of the business, but you need to lead with the business outcomes that you want first, and then just get informed on what's possible, and
Mm.
you'll automatically start making the links between the two.
Wow. I mean, business outcomes, that's definitely a recommendation. And I have seen the transformations, that started with a very strong focus on business outcomes and drilling into the details and how successful they were because of that reason versus, the ones where we were just trying to replicate something new and like, follow the trend. And yeah, so I love how you described it. Joel, you're pretty passionate about Procure Tech Cup, which I don't know a lot about, but how does that tie into helping people discover the right way to do this?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So for folks who don't know about it, the Procure Tech Cup is one of the events that I run through the media side of my business, and it's all about educating procurement pros on that art of the possible, right? On what you can actually do with technology these days, right? If you have the right quality data, the right governance, the right business case, etc., right? And so the Procure Tech Cup it was both a weekly show where we bring on procure tech vendors, procure tech providers, and we discuss the art of the possible, and show some demos sometimes as well to support those discussions. And then it's also a virtual conference that I'm going to be holding in April 2026. where essentially I want these procure tech providers, and then we'll have additional content as well, but to come and educate procurement professionals on digital fluency, digital literacy skills, right? To the point that you made. And so last year it was more focus on demos, right, and showing the products. But this year it's more around how to build a successful business case, how to create a deployment plan for different types of solution categories within procurement technology. It's how to craft the change management plan. What types of governance do you need to put in place if you're going to be successful with these things, right? Because the market has exploded, where there's 600, 700 plus different software companies that are offering solutions to procurement. And so it's providing a framework to think about how to approach that market for procurement professionals, so that you don't get overwhelmed by the paradox of choice, right? And so the Procure Tech Cup is just one of the efforts, along with the newsletter, to give, in a very bite-sized infotainment type format, the information to procurement professionals, and then put their market research on autopilot, right? So if you want to, people always ask me about the learning journeys, what training should I do, etc. And I often tell them, like, I'm trying to craft something where you don't need to have this huge mountain of training to climb. Like, just tune in every week, and then in a year you'll be like, oh, I know a lot more than I did last year, right? In
Go
essence,
ahead.
that's the cut.
Last year, yes, I saw that you had a great representation of procure-tech companies. Pretty much every name that I've possibly heard of was there. And then I love this ad about going to specific problems that you're seeing and deep diving on that business case. Yes, I cannot tell you how many months people spend trying to get that right. So yes, that's awesome. Now, Joel, like thinking about like, a CPO who's just starting their digital journey. I know like everybody's at different stages, but
Mm-hmm.
there's still a lot of companies who are kind of just at the start, like who want to, and then they have to understand about AI, and like they want to make sure their tech works end to end, right? That's not something that's a given in procurement. Still, like after 20 years probably. So what would be your advice to a CPO who wants to start this right? And yes, they have tight budgets as always. Yeah, and what would be the smartest steps for them as per you?
So the first thing I'd address is something that you baked into your question, which is some organizations don't have a really high maturity as it comes to digital, right? And what I would posit is, think of it as a bell curve, right? And a majority of organizations are in the middle of that bell curve, where they have some technology, some of it talks to each other, some of it doesn't. There's issues. There's still a lot of work to be done. And I always think of it as like it's a card castle, right? Where you're building little pieces, and then the wind comes in, like a market change or M&A, or change in leadership, change in strategy, and then your card castle falls to the floor and you need to rebuild it again, right? And so it's normal to feel like that. It's normal to be in that situation. I think to directly answer your question, what I think is most important is getting that digital literacy muscle to go to build through your team, through your function, right? And
Interesting.
so starting small is always the answer in that case, right? And if you're going to experiment, right? So putting in place, a digital procurement team, if not officially, well, unofficially, with people who have an interest in that, right? And then finding where are our biggest pain points right today. How can we leverage the existing technology that we have, that's usually like enterprise IT provided technology? So I'm thinking of the Microsoft suite, for example, Power BI, Power Automate, these tools, SharePoints, etc. How can we use these tools? And you may be on the Google suite, you may be on another suite, right? But how can I use the tools that are generally available to me from IT for the whole corporate enterprise, to start experimenting with solving these pain points, right? And getting very intimate with my IT business partner, right? Who's responsible in IT for the procurement relationship, right? And making sure that I have that person in our weekly cadence, that we're putting initiatives in place, right? That we're trying to solve them with our existing tools. And as you do that, you're also looking externally to my show or conferences, white papers, newsletters, to get educated on, hey, what's happening out there, right? You might also be looking at your competitors in your industry to see what they're doing. Although I always find we put too much emphasis and too much weight on what other competitors are doing because they have a different business strategy, right? They might have different problems, different context, right? And so it's a data point, but you shouldn't put too much weight on it, right? It should just inform you in terms of what you should be looking at, and then figuring out if there's a fit for you or not.
Mhm.
And then that tends to converge, right? Where you're going to build something on Power Automate, it's going to be all right. It's going to get you 80% of the way there, but there's still manual stuff you need to do to reconcile and or integrate processes across the end-to-end flow. And so, hey, maybe we need to go get a fit for purpose tool here because there's still a lot of value to unlock. And there's these tools that are built fit for purpose for that have good references, etc. And then you start thinking about building that business case, right? And you know that you'll have a higher chance of being successful in implementing that stuff because your team has been for weeks working on this problem, understanding the details of constraints, dependencies, IT architecture. You have IT at the party, right, with you, and so you're crafting this vision together of where you want to go, why you want to go there, and what the important problems are, or considerations are to make you successful, right? And so I would take that two-pronged approach of weekly experimentation and weekly looking at what the market is doing, and so it's just creating those two habits at an organizational scale, so
Mhm.
that and then the opportunities and the value will kind of bubble up to the surface by itself.
Wow, I'm blown away by that answer because my brain was just ticking away. I had this instinct that I want to note this down, but then I thought, okay, good, this is getting the bell curve. Yes, now I'll remember. I'm getting my ideas validated. This is what I've experienced. But the way you've explained that bell curve, I think that's really important to us. Have that awareness. Hey, sometimes when I talk to leaders, I feel like they're in this alone and they're not, right? So that's great for them to know. And then starting with business outcomes, yes, all that investment into building the right capabilities within your team is so important. I love how you describe that, and then that business partnering, that it needs to start early. We expect our partners to work with us, but hey, in this case we need to doing the same, involving. Those are the reasons why people take so much time to build the business case, because they start trying to write something and they don't know how to go about it. Yeah, those are like the steps they should be doing before the business case. Awesome, very well captured.
And it may seem very heavy, and you're going, a year, like I'm going to do this a year before I can figure it out, right? And I think the opportunity is, hey, maybe you partner with someone externally, such as myself, or there's people on the market, right, that have been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years, right? And so the opportunity is, hey, if we partner with someone like that to set us up, right, and also give us frameworks for how to think about this stuff, that's the accelerator that's going to get you to value a lot faster as well. So that's another way to take what I said, but to make it, to compress the timeline, right? Because learning is a slow curve, right? And so if you can put the ramp on that curve a bit higher, then you'll get there faster as well. But I think the learning, not just you as a CPO, right, to address your question, but you and your team, and bringing everybody along for the journey, and your key stakeholders is the key to success, right? Because we still see in survey after survey, not just in procurement but overall, like digital transformation failure rates remain, anywhere from 60 to 90%, right? And
Yeah,
so one in two to one in one
yeah.
in one projects anywhere around there, right, is having a tough time reaching their initial objectives for digital transformation projects, right? So we
Mm.
have this fallacy. We believe this fallacy that we have this huge capacity to adopt change as an organization, in general, right? And so it's how do I eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? And hopefully with a fridge where we can keep our ideas cool.
Yeah.
So that's how I think about it.
Just hearing that, it makes me feel that if we were more clear about starting with an end in mind and being very clear about what that end looks like, then yes, we might approach it a bit differently. And I know there's lots of constraints to keep in mind: the budget, the timing. The timing is never on our side.
And
It does take years, right? Even at least a year is what it normally takes to get something rolled out and functional.
Yeah, well, I think now as well, like as we talk about, we talked about the future of digital procurement. I think what we're seeing as well is that, the solution vendors recognize that organizations do not have the time, the budget, the resourcing availability to do these 6, 9, 12-month projects anymore,
Yeah.
right? When you talk about the source to pay suites. And so a lot of them are trying to um, shorten the implementation down to the fastest possible, right? Anywhere from like 8 weeks to 3 months, right, to 12 weeks is more what I'll see for a specific module, right? Getting an initial version of a module up and running, even with the source to pay suite providers now. And so vendors are very in tune to that fact, right? Like we can't spend 6 months, 9 months getting data ready and building interfaces and all that good stuff. Like how do we get to value much faster, and how do we reduce the implementation cycle times? So those are things that you should be asking questions on as well, right? How
Mm,
does that happen, right? Because
mm,
systems with a lot integration is always the long pole in the tent, right? So either that or like onboarding users, onboarding suppliers, right? So those two things, right? How are you removing the need for integrations? Do you have standard add-ons? Have you gotten rid of integrations to get to value, right? And then the other piece is like for suppliers, are they already on your solution? Do they not have to be on the solution at all for us to get value, right? And then the rest is just work, right? It's just internal work that you control, and so you can reduce the cycle time with the vendor.
mm. Wow. Yeah, lots of food for thought there. So, talking about skills, I know this is also an important area that you touched upon. And I want to understand a bit more. Like, what do you think is more important right now? Having the mindset to, like, everybody wants to get tech skills on their, radar.
Resume.
But, like, is it the mindset or is it like just the training that's important? And then, like, how do people balance that with having the softer skills, the people skills?
So I think, and I alluded to this a bit earlier in our conversation, but the best skills that you could develop are essentially business analysis skills and project management skills, change management skills, right? So a lot of it is, yes, analytical skills, but the soft skills that go around it as well, right? Because if you're going to build a business case alone by yourself in an Excel file in your corner, like it might be a really good business case from a number standpoint, but nobody's going to believe in it. Nobody's going to adopt it. Nobody's going to sponsor it. And the project's going to go nowhere, right? And so there's a balance there between yes, getting tech fluency, tech literacy, but you don't have to become a techie, right? You don't have to know how to configure different systems, that sort of thing, right? What you need to know is what's the art of the possible. Like is it realistic for me to think that with computer vision we're going to scan an invoice and get all the information out automatically, right? Because at the end of the day it's always about automation, right? Is how can I take some work that we're doing manually today or inefficiently today, right? We're having to swivel chair information from system to system or build a custom integration that always breaks and then IT has to go fix it, right? How do I automate that business process using available technology? And then how do I have a BS detector when I'm either partnering with developers internally with IT and or external software vendors that are coming to help me solve a problem, a business problem, right? And so it's really sitting at that intersection between procurement, the best practices from a business standpoint, which remains supremely important, and then technology, and that's more how do I craft a business process, right? How do I use process flows and swim lanes? How do I
Mm,
do that, right? How do I translate that into business requirements to run an RFP? How do I partner with IT to get something from idea to deployed in a productive system where users are using it, right? And the whole software development lifecycle, the development and testing, and then unit testing, and then giving it into a quality environment with real data and testing it end to end, and then deploying that, making user notes, training, updating training documentation. Knowing that process from a
mm,
procurement standpoint is really important, because you're also, as you put these SaaS applications in place, one of the trends is that procurement starts being the administrator instead of relying on IT, because they, hey, we want to be able to change the system over time, right? And make it evolve with our needs. And we're tired of logging tickets and having to wait 3, 6, 9, 12 months for them to get done.
Yeah.
And so you need those IT skills or traditional IT skills as well in your function, so that your tools are not becoming, this garbage can of processes that no longer work because they worked at the go live, but then they decayed over time. Right. So, anyways, a lot there, but I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I like your answer because, I think what you're focusing on is not just like I've seen a lot of people go in and do trainings on business analysis, different project management. I don't know if yeah, I'm sure there's something on change management as well. But like, when it comes to real life, then they are like just focused on getting things done, and they forget about those implementing that a lot of the time. So taking a step back, like just thinking of the bigger picture there, and like trying to see how you can do things differently, how you can implement and make things better over time. And I think that speaks a lot to the mindset. So I think that's something that I'm trying to do as well in the work that I do. But I know that it's not like it doesn't come intuitively, right? Like our instinct is to
Yeah.
just go back, back to the default, which is get things done, and that doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, and you make me think about, like, it's the same dynamic in your personal life and in your work life, in the sense where stuff's going to come at you, right? Like stuff's going to come at you from everywhere, and you're going to have more asks than you have capacity to roll them out and to do them well. And that's the same thing in your personal life, right? Like you have your kids, your parents, your friends, your community, your work. Everybody, everything is asking more of you than you have capacity to deliver, right? And so I think the mindset to have on top of the skills we discussed, it, ties right into what you were saying, which is, I'd much rather that you do 2 or 3 very very targeted changes, right, that are tied to your business objective and are going to actually move the needle, and that you ignore as much as possible everything else, right?
Mm,
Instead of saying, oh, we're going to try to meet everybody's requirements, everybody's ask, right? So we're going to do 20 things, but we're all going to do them at a lower quality level,
mm, mm.
and some of them are going to get left behind because we get pulled in every which direction, right? And so I think prioritization,
Yeah.
and then sticking to that priority, right, and trying to ignore everything else is also a huge skill, from a not just from a digital procurement standpoint, but just in general, right, in
Life
this
standpoint.
era of business. Yeah, and in life, right? And I think we're all struggling with it and trying to get better over time. But I would come back to that, right? Like leading with no, in the sense where, if I'm thinking of it in a digital procurement context, we've set up a tool, and now we have this process where people can request changes or improvements to the solution. I'm always going to have more requests than I have capacity to deliver. And so I need to be much more stringent with people of, like, okay, are you sure? Is this just a nice to have? Like, where's the business value? Can you help me build the business case? Can you get a bit more systematic with your questions, so that no is the default answer, right? And the things you say yes to are fewer, but they have more impact, right? You've ensured that they're going to move the needle for your business based on your strategy and objectives that you have.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that because that's been the one of the most difficult learnings of my life. I want to do everything, but I learned the hard way that that's not possible. So now I know that especially like in procurement, like you could end up with 20 different things at the same time, trying to either like, being somebody who wants to say yes to the business partners who want to build the relationship. So it's really important to have leadership that helps you prioritize, and I mean, for me, that's the basic that I always now check, like even at the start of anything, that hey, what do we do? Like if this gets picked up, what do we drop? And that's come the hard way, and I know a lot of people are not comfortable asking that question, but I've seen that the leaders who really want to make an impact, with the work they're doing, they appreciate that question. So yeah,
Yeah,
like I want to share that if it helps someone approach it
because
differently.
it's a trap we set for ourselves, right? In the
Yeah.
sense where you're like, hey, if I do more, I'm going to have more impact, and I'm going to get to where I want to go faster. But what happens is you end up diluting the impact of everything you're doing. And then, things get dropped, things die, right? Like, and then you have to pick other stuff up, and you end up just kind of running on a treadmill instead
Yeah,
of running out on the open road, right? And so I think little improvements every week that are actually tangible, right? Instead of just doing everything I need to do, and then, oh, we forgot what we were talking about, a month ago on that file, and we need to get everybody together again and talk about it again one more time, right? So doing less, I think, actually gets you farther along your progression curve and
that's
faster,
true.
right? It doesn't seem that way because you're going, oh, I'm doing less than I was doing a couple of weeks ago, right? But you're going deeper and you're actually delivering something on fewer items, and so that builds up over time, right? And I
It
think so. So
does.
it's just another way of saying what we've been saying, but I think it's a really
Yeah.
important point.
Definitely. Good to get all the, the thoughts validated through an expert. So, okay, so you talked about change as well, and I know, like in procurement, I mean, there would be people who won't agree with that, but we all love our process to some extent, right? And
Yeah.
change doesn't come easy because of that. So, what are some of the mistakes you've seen, companies make in terms of rolling out digital tools?
So I would say I'd validate what you were saying, like process, especially processes that we know and that we've done before. They're like a warm blanket on a cold day, right? Like it's just so cozy and familiar, and so yeah, we can often default to doing that, right? But I think uh, people that when we talk about change, people don't fear change. They fear incompetent, like feeling incompetent. They fear the unknown. They fear uh, not being able to keep up with the parade, so to speak, right? And so that's the underlying fears behind change, right? And so if you want to be successful with change, you need to address those root causes, right? And so what does that mean? Including people as soon as possible, right? To the extent possible, because you want the smaller the project team, the more efficient you are, but also you need to bring stakeholders along the way at each key point to ensure that their input is actually heard, is actually integrated into the solution. You're not designing something in a silo in your own make believe reality, right? And so that's the journey. And one of the frameworks that I love for this is the ProSci ADKAR framework, ADKAR. So awareness. Everybody needs to go through this for any change, right? So they need awareness, they need desire, they need the ability, they need the knowledge, and then you need to reinforce that ability and that knowledge over time, right? And so every single person that you want to adopt a new tool needs to go through those 5 steps. And if you're getting resistance, it's because they got stuck at one of those steps and you didn't
Okay.
actually give them the desire to change, or you didn't give them the ability to change, right? And the knowledge that they need. So if you feel resistance in a change project, that's usually what is happening. And so if you think of, okay, I need all of the impacted stakeholders, they need to go through their ADKAR. Here are the things that we're doing in our change management plan to ensure that's happening, right? And once you do that, you're going to go like, oh my God, this is a lot of work. And the answer to that is yes, it is a lot of work. And so that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, where we overestimate our capacity to adopt change in organizations. Everybody needs to go through their ADKAR, and right now we're not really doing that most of the time. We're just paying lip service to change management. We're going, okay, just deliver the project within budget, like make sure the data works, da da da. It's live. Woo! Let's celebrate, right? But then everybody's stuck at like awareness, right? They're not even aware there's a need to change. They have no desire to change, right? They're still in the blanket of their old process. And so I always say, like, you much rather doing a smaller change and doing the ADKAR for everybody because there's big business impact for that small change than to say we're going to transform the whole procurement function in 18 months and we're going to go from ugly to beautiful and it's going to be over, right? So I think there's on paper that makes a lot of sense, but when you take in the human aspect of change and human psychology into the picture, you go, oh, okay, yeah, I understand why we overestimate our capacity to adopt change because look at this beautiful business case, right? Uh, but then on the other side, we need every single person to go through those 5 steps for us to actually get adoption and then actually get the benefits from the solution in the business case that we have. Right? So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I that's a new framework. I mean, I had heard of it briefly, but I hadn't thought of that in the way of resistance, managing resistance. That's great. Awesome. Thanks for that, sharing that. Now, this has been wonderful, Joel, and I know that we have like one last question for you. But yeah, like before we get to it, I also just want to acknowledge that the work that you're doing, and sharing all this literacy with everyone, that's going to be super helpful to so many people. And I know you've been doing videos on LinkedIn now, way more. But yeah, like just getting this whole conversation, like this is like such a value add for so many people, so just want to acknowledge you for that.
Oh, I appreciate it. And I hope so. I mean, I try, that's what I try. I want people to avoid the issues of Joel past, right? So
Yeah.
so that's always how I think about it, is like if I can share experiences that I've had, and then the thinking that goes behind looking at the different frameworks, integrating them into operations, like if I can give people insight into that and it can avoid them that same pain, or it can shorten the pain, shorten the learning cycle, right? Because they'll try something and go, oh yeah, okay, now I understand what Joel was saying, and I can implement
Yeah.
it faster. That's the value of working with a consultant or with someone who's gone through it before, right? Is they shorten the learning cycle. So hopefully that helps, right? That's the
That
goal.
helps, and you make it interesting. I think that's the best part of it. So
I appreciate
awesome.
that.
So one question about AI, like of course it's everywhere. So what I want to ask you is that what do you think would be like one, let's say, trend in AI, or any tool that you find promising that could completely or that would add maximum value in the next 3 to 5 years? What would
And
you
so
place your
that's
bet
an
on?
interesting question, right? Because let's just go back to the basics, really. And now you've asked me such a big question. I'll try to keep it succinct, right? So artificial
No, no
intelligence,
pressure.
how do we define it, right? The artificial intelligence is systems that simulate human intelligence, right? So reasoning, reading, understanding, etc., right? So that's a very wide definition. And that's why I say it's been around for 20, 25, 30 years, right? So like robotic process automation to me is a subfield of artificial intelligence. We talked about natural language processing, about machine learning, computer vision, right? And so I think there's no one domain that's going to blow the ceiling or the roof off the ceiling, right? What we've seen in the past couple of years is the mainstreamification, if I can put it that way, of generative AI, and then everybody's just talking about AI, just using AI as a term to mean everything and anything, right? And so
Yeah, that's
when we
true.
think about Gen AI, it's like, Chat GPT, Gemini, Copilot,
Mm,
Anthropic with Claude, Perplexity. So there's 5, 6, 7 different large language models, which is also a subdomain of AI, right? And so that's when we talk about AI, we're thinking about those, right? So I think Gen AI is a very interesting field that's going to keep bringing things to the forefront, right? Because it's like having someone you can talk to on chat that can actually potentially do work for you in a way that's either generating a simple task, an RFP draft for you based on your instructions, if you have good instructions, all the way to being an AI agent, right? Which is, I'm able to give an AI system instructions, and then they can actually reason, right, or go through decision logic to string different tasks together, right? So send the RFP out, select the vendors based on certain criteria of that RFP,
mm,
gather responses, make an evaluation grid. Like if I can
mm,
get an AI system with different subdomains stitched together to get me that outcome, then it's an agentic AI system because it's got
mm.
agency, right? It can I've given it the power to take certain decisions, right? That doesn't mean I should let it go on its own, right? There's also this concept of human in the loop where I want to be able to put myself at different validation steps to maybe correct course, right? But I think that's the big trend you're hearing about. but it's not a new trend in the sense where we've been trying to automate business processes for decades and decades. This is just a new set of tools along with Gen AI to help you do that, right? And so I think if you want to be able to take advantage of the trend, it's understanding the different subdomains. They all have advantages and disadvantages. Like if I take RPA as an example, super fast automation, very reliable, like never going to make an error, but on a very rigid process, right? So if your process changes, then your RPA robot is broken, right? So every domain has trade-offs like that, right? And so when you're stitching together an agent or a business process supported by artificial intelligence systems, you need to be aware of that, right? So it's a long-winded answer to say I don't think there's any one trend. Agentic AI is the one that's surfacing now. Gen AI was the one a couple years ago. Before that, we had cloud. Before that, we had just the internet, right? And so it's just a different iteration of the same process, which is how do I automate this business process? How do I save time so that I can either run with a smaller team or I can redeploy energy to, in procurement's case, more spend under management, tackling more categories, being more smart about how we tackle our existing categories to get more savings and or other value levers out of it, right? Faster delivery times, more innovation from our supplier, less risk, etc. Right? So
Okay.
to me, that's why I say procurement's the same process as it's always been. We just have a more and more sophisticated toolbox to automate and optimize it to have more impact. So
Yeah,
I hope that was a succinct answer.
it was because I know like we think about AI and we want to know like, hey, what do we do first and what's most important, but actually the truth is that it's impacting everything we do, right? And so yeah,
Mhm.
your answer is very well balanced, and I mean this was enlightening for me, and I'm sure like lots it will help others as well think about it in a different way. Joel, such a pleasure to have you, and thank you so much for making the time. I mean, I feel like I could go on and on, but
And we
yeah, like this
can
was a great
offline.
start. And yeah, we can. I can see your passion about the topic, and yeah, there's so much to learn there. But yes, maybe we can have a follow-up conversation. Let's see if lots of people have more questions after this, then we can bring you back on.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me, Richa. I really I appreciate it. I like what you're doing. I'm gung ho to support any person who takes the time to create, right? Create content, create articles, share knowledge, get the conversation going. So I want to tip my hat to you for inviting me and for everything that you're doing. I know you have a crazy life, and so the fact that you're prioritizing this and dedicating time to learning is just a testament to you.
Thank you, Joel. Yeah, I want to support in whatever way I can. This has been a great, let's say, experience. Procurement has become a part of my life. So yes, whatever I can do to help.
Awesome.
Thank you. Okay.
Talk to you soon.